We're not talking about the best of them. We're just talking about the rest of them.
Not the worst parts, but the best parts. And the best parts we have. The best of the rest.
Hello, and everything that has a beginning has an end, Neo. Welcome to Best of the Rest, the show where we take a second look at movies that were poorly received upon release and challenge ourselves to only talk about the things we like and what the movie does well. It's Matrix month, and this week we are talking the 2003 film The Matrix Revolutions. My name is Chris Logan, and I am joined, as always, by my opposite, Andrew Williams. You ready for this one, Andrew?
I am. I am excited to close off the original trilogy as we move forward.
Yeah, it normally is the part where I kind of talk about, what's your history with this film, but these Matrix sequels, especially 2 and 3, are just so ingrained with one another that kind of your history with one is your history with the other. They were released the same year. They are kind of critical, and audience reception is forever linked. It's basically the same history. But do you remember, did you see this one in theaters?
I'm absolutely certain I saw this in theaters.
Yeah, same.
Well, this has been 2003. I would have been 16. I feel like I had to have. Like, I genuinely, I now that I think about it, I'm not sure if I remember, but like, I feel like there's no way I didn't. Like, you have to. Like,
sure, especially if you're 16 years old. Like, this is the coolest movie.
If you weren't gonna have anything to talk about with your friends if you didn't go see Matrix.
Well, we're gonna dive all into it. The third entry in the Matrix series, like as you said, capping off this original trilogy. We will be back to talk about The Matrix Resurrections. But before then, we're taking a week break from the Matrix franchise because next week is episode 100 of this very podcast, Best of the Rest. We're in episode 99 right now, Andrew. And of course, we've done plenty of bonus episodes, so we've released over 100 episodes technically by this point. But as far as our main series of what we do, the hashtag Positivity Podcast, we are approaching our 100th episode. Wild, isn't it, Andrew?
That's nuts. How did this happen? How did you let this happen?
I feel like we just started. Like we started this during truly the true part of the pandemic, right? Stuff's still locked down. There's no vaccine yet, and we've completely come out of that portion of our lives, and our show keeps going. It is truly just like a part of my life right now. There's the weekly rituals that I do, whether it's editing or recording or watching movies for this podcast. And Andrew, I wouldn't have it any other way. I'm looking forward to another 100 episodes, honestly.
Easy now, Jesus. But no, I feel the same. This podcast came. I still vehemently remember you being like, I should travel. Like, there was this mindset that you were like, one of us was going to travel like every 4 to 8 weeks so that we could record a batch of episodes together. And I'll be honest with you, I was never going to do that. But
I'm glad we worked it out, though.
Yeah, me too. Don't get me wrong. Glad it worked out the way that it did, but it was not going to happen that way. But yeah, so it came about like during the pandemic. I think I was at my last apartment. And I've since moved into Liz's house, or our house, I should say. And so things, I've watched aspects of my whole life change around me while doing this show, and that's wild. It's crazy to think about.
Crazy to think about. Look forward to the big celebration next week. The movie we're covering, you'll just have to wait and see, because right now it's all about The Matrix Revolutions, released November 5th of 2003, just 6 months after The Matrix Reloaded. Made on a budget of roughly $150 million. As we discussed last week, the budgets are kind of intertwined with each other, as this was a joint production. At the box office, it only brings in $427 million, which if you compare that to a $150 million budget, you could look at it as slightly profitable. But compare it to the box office of The Matrix Reloaded, it's about half. There was a major drop-off in ticket sales, in the box office, and the overall pop culture reception of the Matrix franchise. It really takes a nosedive with this film. Critics are not on board. It holds just a 34% on Rotten Tomatoes. That is firmly in the negative camp. The big sort of reception at the time was like, this is not a satisfying conclusion to the trilogy. That was its legacy then, and
Still
there hasn't
legacy
really
now.
been much.
I mean-
Much people looking back, and maybe there should be, Andrew. Maybe more people should revisit these films.
Maybe they should. The audience score on this is slightly better, sitting at a 60%, versus the 34 of the critics. It is wild, though. I don't know if this holds any water, but I think part of it may be that Matrix Reloaded comes out in the summer. This is back when I think winter releases definitely struggled more, generally speaking, in the box office than summer releases did. Nowadays, it's kind of all really kind of bleeded together, and there really is no season anymore for films. They kind of just come out whenever. But that first one comes out beginning middle of May, so right as school's getting out for a lot of people. Obviously, the hype was there; people were still in, and like I said, the general reception to Reloaded was pretty positive. So it's interesting that Revolutions kind of comes out the gate and struggles, and doesn't quite get there. But I do think that November release, because we'll talk about it a little bit more. But like I said, it comes out, I think, beginning of November. And you have movies that come out like Thanksgiving weekend and kind of exist in that like between Thanksgiving and Christmas space. You have stuff that gets released at Christmas that kind of capitalizes off that Christmas New Year break that kids tend to have. But this comes out beginning of November. So I think the idea was that it was going to kind of be this, have some legs throughout the holiday season to kind of really pick up, to just kind of keep going through the new year. But it just doesn't quite work out that way. And you got to believe the critical reception is certainly part of that. So, but like you said, I think maybe people are sleeping on them a little bit.
That's a good point about the release dates, because back then, way back in the early 2000s and before, your blockbusters were released in the summer. That's your popcorn films, and November, December was like Oscar season. It's like your dramas,
your prestige
like Beautiful
stuff.
Mind and Ali are released alongside traditional holiday films, like How the Grinch Stole Christmas or whatever. There were truly seasons at the box office, whereas now a Marvel movie releases every 3 to 4 months, regardless of whether it's summer or not, and they always make $1 billion. So it's truly a different time at the box office. But this one, a bit of a trailblazer, if I do say so myself. I mean, the idea of two movies, the idea of them releasing the same year is just so.
Yeah, even
cool.
Lord of
I
the
don't
Rings
know.
didn't do that.
I think I'm trying to remember. It was Reloaded. It must have been like rushed to DVD, because DVDs used to take almost a year to come out after the box office release. But I'm sure that they had the DVD out of Reloaded before Revolutions came out, so people that didn't see it in theaters could catch up on the story before seeing this one. But
They did.
Just
I just looked. Reloaded was released on VHS and DVD on October 14th, 2003, and sold over 4 million units on the first day. That is nuts. So that was about 2 weeks, 3 weeks maybe before Revolutions came out. So yeah, they were definitely like, hey, if you didn't see it then, see it in time. And like I said, 4 million units the first day. That's
pretty good.
That's pretty good. So the hype, I think, is definitely still there going into Revolutions. So.
We've said this so many times in the podcast over the past 98 episodes that the purpose of this podcast is simply to celebrate the things that we like in these movies. It's really that simple.
Yep.
We're not trying to convince you these poorly received movies are actually masterpieces, or you yourself should change your mind on the movie as a whole. We're not, okay? But I've kind of let it out of the bag last episode that I love the series. I love these movies. I always have. And rewatching them, revisiting them now, the love only grows. And I say that because I'm looking at the Rotten Tomatoes little synopsis, okay, which summarizes the reviews by saying a disappointing conclusion to the Matrix trilogy as characters and ideas take a backseat to the special effects. And I'm kind of flabbergasted by that synopsis. And I know it's unfair to attack Rotten Tomatoes. They're just summarizing the thoughts that are the critics. But like, I just don't see that. I always kind of thought the backlash to this one was that there's not enough special effects, particularly within the Matrix. There's a lot of real world stuff, and that it gets too heady and too philosophical. And that synopsis is saying that, oh, it was just a special effects, bombastic film, which I don't see it that way, and I never have. And on top of that, and I promise my rant will be coming to a close here, I think it's I don't like the argument that being special effects heavy is inherently a bad thing. Films
Right.
are a visual medium. Special effects
You know what other
matter.
movie is special effects heavy? Wall-E.
Mad Max. Yeah.
And you all love that movie, so shut up.
Hashtag PP. I mean, I understand if you're all action and not giving people a reason to care or a satisfying story. I get it, but it's not the action that's making it bad. It's the lack of other things. You know what I mean? So I don't like the idea of calling something special effects heavy as a negative. And we
Well,
can
it's the
move
same.
on from that rant
It's the
there.
same argument that we probably talked about it last time, but like just that idea of like, oh, well, there's too much CG. And it's like what you mean is there's too much bad CG. Like you don't care about CG. You care when it looks bad, and it's the same idea, I think, in a certain way.
This movie, of course, like the previous two, is written and directed by the Wachowskis. And we talked plenty about their work last week. But, Andrew, as much as I love the Matrix movies, I was looking through the Wachowskis' overall filmography, and I've actually seen very little outside of their Matrix series, which is kind of strange because I love the series so much. But I think other than the Matrix movies, I've only seen V for Vendetta, which they don't even direct. They're just writers on, adapting it from a comic book. So there's, their influence is felt, but it's not like a true Wachowskis film. But I never saw Jupiter Ascending, Speed Racer. I know the reception of these movies. I think it's possible that we will revisit some of them, and maybe this podcast will give me an excuse to finally jump into them. But yeah, even their show Sense8, which I have heard some pretty good stuff about, I never dove into. Just I haven't seen much for them. How about you?
I've seen more than you because I saw Speed Racer. I have a friend who feels about Speed Racer like you do about Amazing Spider-Man 2. Basically, he thinks Speed Racer was tremendously underrated when it came out, and he thinks it is still like he would actually probably say Speed Racer is his favorite Wachowski film. Like no joke, he would say it's his favorite. I've seen some of the stuff they did. Like I think like V for Vendetta and Ninja Assassin are both directed by James McTeague, who was like a cinematographer. Worked with the Wachowskis for a great many years on a lot of their projects. I've seen Cloud Atlas. I've seen Jupiter Ascending. I have not seen Bound, even though I bought it a couple years ago. And I realized that's it. It's the Matrix trilogy, and then it's Bound, Speed Racer, Cloud Atlas, and Jupiter Ascending. It's an interestingly small filmography for what you would consider relatively high-profile creators. But I have seen most of it. So, yeah, I'm curious what you think about some of these.
Maybe we'll find out on future episodes. But for now, I think it's time we just dive into this movie, The Matrix Revolutions. Andrew, you ready?
Yes.
As the machines grow ever closer to breaching the last city of Zion, Neo and Trinity attempt to reach the Machine City in an effort to end the war. Once the city is breached, time becomes even more limited as the machines tear through the humans' defenses. After being attacked by Bane during their trip, Neo is left blinded and Trinity perishes in a crash landing. Alone, Neo makes an offer to the machines to fight the program Smith within the Matrix before he can take over the machine world. The machines agree, and once inside, Neo once again finds himself fighting for the fate of all mankind. Truly an epic tale we have here. There's no secret that there's a lot of symbolism and religious influences and mythology influences on this series, but Neo being the savior, being the Jesus Christ figure, I think is most apparent in this film.
Yes. I mean, you're dealing, like I said, it's a very dense mythology. There's a lot of room here for stuff, and obviously we know there's some tie-in media. There's things like the Animatrix, which I don't know if we talked about last week at all, but is something that I actually am quite a fan of. I had never seen it until recently, and there were definitely several segments that I thought were really creative takes on places in this mythology.
It's so good. I don't think we did talk about it, but like I love that their segments overall they only enhance your experience of the films. You don't watch the films and feel like you're missing something, and then you have to watch this anime to get filled in. Like it's truly just the best way to make supplemental material. Like if you want to watch it, it's there. It either expands your appreciation of the main story or gives you side stories unrelated to this one that are just fun ways to explore this world. Truly, I think it is a very, very good film that if you're at all, even a little bit of a fan of the series or even just that first one, it's worth checking out. And how about that title? Animatrix. What a perfect
It was right there.
pun. It's so good.
Right there. Yeah, pretty good. There are some segments in it that kind of tie in, like the big one there is the final fight of the Osiris, which is meant to be like a lead in to Matrix Reloaded. The kid who kind of shows up in Reloaded and Revolutions, you kind of see where he comes from in one of the Animatrix segments. But like you said, none of it is like necessary to understand the story. It just builds on it. And so there are ties to things. One of my favorites is the athlete who pushes himself so hard he forces himself out of the Matrix. And I thought that was a really, really interesting, creative way to kind of go beyond the because they really do imply that like the complicated process of getting somebody out of the Matrix. And then this kind of touches on that idea that there's not just people who they don't necessarily consciously went out of the Matrix because they don't know the Matrix is they don't know what the Matrix is, but they have this this kind of desire to get out that they don't know they have. It's a subconscious thing. And just the idea that he can push his physical body, his quote unquote physical body, so hard it like forces him out of the Matrix. I was like, that's a super neat concept to add to this world and kind of really start trying to dive into the various ways that people interact through the Matrix without necessarily even realizing it. So it's
so
definitely
necessary.
something I'll check out.
Imagine if only computer nerds ended up getting out of the Matrix.
Right.
You have to be really
The
into
jocks can
computers
get out
and
too.
hacking.
Um.
Yeah. The real world is full of just like the most stereotypical nerds you've ever seen.
The jock gets out and sees all the nerds and he's like, put me back in.
He gets out and just beats them all up, just becomes a bully in the real world.
Oh man, that's awful. We're not that awful, folks.
I love the Animatrix. Final Flight of the Osiris, Andrew, is the reason that I saw Dreamcatcher in theaters. And
oh man,
remains the best part
I'm sure,
of that movie. #PP.
I'm sure you've told me that before, but oof. Oof.
That released before the Animatrix was out. This is the only way you can see it. It played before Dreamcatcher. I remember going to the theaters, loving that segment. I have not rewatched Dreamcatcher since then, but man, what a weird movie that was.
I believe that would be a fantastic candidate for this show, especially if we ever did a Stephen King month, which we could absolutely do. So
There's
stay tuned,
been
folks.
Do you think is it safe to say that the poorly received Stephen King adaptations outweigh the praised
Yes.
ones? Yeah. Okay.
Absolutely. Um,
All right. Look forward to that down the line. But right now, it's time to talk about the cast of this film. And as we always do, we're going to start with the high point, the best casting and best performance in the movie. Because every episode, we recognize one person who goes above and beyond the call of duty, that they actually elevate the quality of the entire film with their performance. And we recognize that person by giving them the Mark Strong Award. Andrew, kick us off here. Who is getting your Mark Strong Award for The Matrix Revolutions?
I think you got to go to the top. I'm giving it to Johnny Utah himself, Keanu Reeves. I think, I mean, he's definitely the main character of this installment in a lot of ways. Like, there are other characters, there are other things happening, but the story which you are following through him is kind of the anchor of everything else that's happening here. And I think he's doing a fantastic job of bringing that down to earth in a way, keeping it kind of grounded within himself so that you're not getting too philosophical or anything like that. But it's great. The stuff he has in the real world, gets plenty of action on both sides of it by getting his big fight with Bane, losing his eyes, and then ultimately having his big Superman fight with Smith at the end. It's all great. I love it. And, we talked about Keanu Reeves last week. We don't need to dive back through his entire life story, but this is a fantastic run, and I think he's a big part of taking this material and elevating it even higher than it was written as. So it's a great performance, and I think people sleep on it. So yeah,
that's a great pick and a great point. People sleeping on Keanu Reeves in general, which is something we talked about last week. Like, there's kind of this debate on whether he's even a good actor, and he is. He's very.
He's not
good
John
at
Travolta, folks. Easy.
But I think this movie in particular, Neo feels like a role he was born to play. Truly, I feel like he had a grip on this character from day one, but still somehow only gets better, and he is just in complete control of the character in this movie. And so much of his decisions are about what he chooses not to do and how reserved he is, but still speaks so much about the character. I'm in particular in awe of how he gets so much comedy out of this character. I mean, he's in a very dire situation this entire film. I don't think actually smiles like once, and he's not outright making jokes, but he still finds humor. Like, whenever he is stuck at the train station and he tries to escape by running one direction only to run back onto the screen from the other direction, and he looks around and just says simply shit. And it's like, I remember being at theaters and that getting like a really big laugh. Or he loses his eyes and he's embracing Trinity and says, "I'm sorry, I think you have to drive." It's so good. So again, even though he's like so reserved and stoic, still finds layers to the character and nuance, and is just so cool and just so badass. I mean, it's so clear. A big part of the movie's legacy, just all the Matrix films, is how a lot of the actors did a lot of their own stunts and fight choreography, and you can tell like Keanu really threw himself into the training, and you can tell it's him like just as a martial artist essentially, especially by this third film, going through the paces and doing this. And that sort of, he's always been like an action star, but like the hand-to-hand combat and martial arts aspect of it really became part of his appeal, like moving forward in his career. You don't
absolutely
get that John Wick character without going through this first. So, Andrew, it's an excellent pick. I think Keanu's wonderful in all these movies, but this is probably his best turn as Neo, in my opinion. So, gotta praise you for that pick. But Andrew, I'm gonna go a different direction with my Mark Strong Award, to the surprise of no one. Hugo Weaving is now a 2-time Mark Strong Award winner for his role as Smith. I had to give it up to him last movie because I absolutely love the way that character starts becoming unhinged. And then you get to this third movie, and he is just full-on maniacal villain, chewing up the scenery. I mean, he gets like a true anime villain maniacal laugh in this film. And that image of his wide-eyed, big gaping smile laughing after he takes over the Oracle is just, it's just so nutty and wonderful. And the character's journey from that first film being just mostly just a by the numbers standard, agent with a little bit of kind of hints of what's going on underneath, to finally like letting it all loose and having the giant fight at the end and being just the true ultimate villain, Neo's opposite. I mean, they do such a good job of building him up over the course of these movies that letting him just finally let go and just go all out, it's what keeps me coming back, or one of the things anyway. Hugo Weaving as Smith, possibly my favorite on-screen villain of all time, easily top 3. I never get bored of it. We talked a lot last week about how Ian Bliss as Bane is just impersonating Hugo Weaving's Smith. And whenever Bane is on screen, especially in this movie, because he kind of lets the facade go down and just gets to act as Smith, you still almost attribute that performance to Hugo Weaving, because it's so convincing that he is being played by the same person. Of course, that's not the case. But yeah, I love this character. I love Weaving's take on it. I think truly no one else could have played it this way. There might be someone else that could play a great Smith, but it wouldn't be this Smith, and this Smith I love. So I like spreading the Mark Strong Award out. I think a lot of people in this movie are doing a great job. I'm glad that you've recognized both Laurence Fishburne in the last film and Keanu Reeves in this one. I'm glad they're Mark Strong Award winners, but I can't lie to the people. I can't lie to our listeners, Andrew. Hugo Weaving, in my heart, is the Mark Strong of this film.
All right. No, you're absolutely correct. It was Keanu or Hugo for pretty much my whole mindset with this film. Hugo does sit out big chunks of it. I think that was what drew me more to Keanu, is because Keanu's just got a more his performance just kind of runs through the whole film, whereas Smith kind of just has several specific moments. Then obviously he's the massive part of the climax of our film. But I can't disagree with your reasoning here. Hugo Weaving S. Smith is one of the great film villains of this millennium. It is unbelievable just how iconic that character became in the immediate aftermath of this, and is still in a lot of ways. You still see references to it. You still see like the agent jokes and things like that. It still shows up. So, and that's in no small part than what Hugo Weaving does with that character over the course of these 3 films, culminating in what he wants here, which is basically he wants everything. He wants it all. And Neo's the only one that can stop him. So in a way, this basically is a Superman movie. But
in a lot of ways, this is a Superman movie.
Hugo Weaving is just Brainiac, basically. But that's actually pretty inspired casting for Brainiac. Good job, Wachowskis. You know what you were doing. But
write that down. Send a tweet to James Gunn real quick.
Yeah, let's get that going. But either way, it's a fantastic pick. Smith, like I said, Smith's role in these films is integral. It is interesting to me, having watched all of these back to back, just how background he is for a lot of these latter 2 films. Like, he's the main villain of the first installment. He really is. The second movie has a couple of different things going on, and then ultimately he does end up being the final fight of the third film. But throughout that second and third film, he spends a lot of it kind of in the background, formulating his plan and putting it together. And you know what he's doing, because this movie spends... We're not in the Matrix at all, except for the final fight, are we? I guess we get Neo out earlier in the film.
Yeah, they visit the Oracle in the beginning, and then most
in
the middle of the movie we're in the real world.
Then we go... So this movie probably has the Matrix in it the least. And so you know Smith's just working in the background. And like I said, it comes to pass where Neo comes back, and just a world of Smiths. I'm sure that's a fantasy for someone, not me. But it's a fantastic pick. It's a fantastic performance. Like I said, one of the great villains of this century, millennium, whatever you want to call it. And you can't ignore Weaving is the reason for that. So good choice, Chris.
Carrie-Anne Moss is back as Trinity, as badass as ever. There's the very little Matrix in this movie, as we established, but we do get some Trinity in the Matrix and making this movie, saving Neo and going to the Merovingian, and she's just awesome. I mean, it's weird 2 weeks in a row like praising actors for the same exact role because it's just more Trinity. Very intimidating woman she is, as we've established. But beyond that, we get the most Trinity and Neo just together alongside each other, sharing scenes with each other in the real world. I think more in this movie than any other one. And it's so much about their bond and their relationship and the fact that they would literally die for one another. And that's, such a main plot thread throughout these movies. And as we see in this movie, Trinity does die because of her commitment to Neo and his cause and being with him. And I remember going back to seeing this in theaters, I remember like that reveal where the camera pulls back and you see like how bad it is. Like as soon as you see she's impaled by like 10 different iron rods, like, oh, she's gone. Like this is the end. That was a big moment. And she really is like the major death in this film. I think it's well done. I think Carrie-Anne Moss is just a wonderful actor in everything that she does. But Trinity, of course, being one of her, if not the defining role of her career. And I think caps it off well with this movie. Well,
I agree.
Did cap it off well. She comes back. We'll talk about it in a couple of weeks.
I'll say her rumors of her death may be greatly exaggerated, but no, I agree. If Keanu Reeves is kind of grounding this whole performance, she's definitely an augment to that. She believes in Neo. She believes in what they're doing, as evidenced by the fact that she agrees to go with him on this kind of what assuredly would be seen by anyone else as a suicide mission. Into the Machine City to basically broker a deal with the machines to take care of Smith. And this is a great performance. It's very similar energy to this guy. They reused the same idea of this death on a character in the film Serenity, which was based off the show Firefly. Has a very similar death for a character. And when I saw that, I was just like, wait, I've seen this before. How dare you? I've already lived through this pain once. Don't make me do it again. But yeah, this is, like I said, we talked about her filmography last time. She's been in, just dozens of great films and television shows. But this is still probably the thing that she is. You hear Carrie-Anne Moss, you think The Matrix.
Laurence Fishburne returns as Morpheus. Fish himself. He's back.
Fish is back.
Fish?
What can you say about Fish, Chris? We said everything there is to say about Fish. He's Fish.
I scrubbed through the behind the scenes of Mission Impossible 3 featurettes online. I did not find that clip of Tom Cruise. I'm going to be busting out the DVDs to get that. I'll rip it out. I'll put it online so we can all experience Tom Cruise.
Fish.
Celebrating Fish. What is there to say about Fish?
Who doesn't love Fish?
Great as Morpheus. Talk about defining roles for an actor's career, and particularly impressive with Laurence Fishburne, who's been around, as we said last week, for decades in movies with plenty of high-profile credits. But his turn as Morpheus is just, it's so good. We get, again, as with both these characters, the least amount of Morpheus in The Matrix, with his unique clip-on sunglasses that don't go behind his ears but still stay on. Very impressive. It's a lot of Morpheus in the real world really clinging to his faith and belief, even though it really took a hit with the last movie and the revelations about the prophecy. He is still pinning all his chips on Neo while grappling with a reality situation that this could be the end of all of humanity. We also take a closer look at his relationship with Niobe as they reconnect throughout the events of this movie, and it's great. It's good stuff. It's Laurence Fishburne. It's Fish. What is there to say?
It's Fish. I did not actually know this, but Gina Torres is in Reloaded and Revolutions briefly, and by the time Revolutions comes out, Laurence Fishburne is married to Gina Torres. I did not know
that's
that.
Nice.
But unfortunately, no longer together, or maybe fortunately, people drift apart. It's allowed, happens. But it's Fish, man. He's I was really looking through his filmography, and this dude has so many like nerd credits at this point that it's kind of ridiculous. Like he's got The Matrix, he's got TMNT where he was the narrator, he's got Fantastic Four, Rise of the Silver Surfer, so alum of the show in a way beyond just last week. He's got the DC stuff with Man of Steel, BVS. He's got the John Wick stuff now. He was Bill Foster and Ant-Man and the Wasp. So I mean, he's like I said, he's got tons of credit at this point. Was on one of the CSIs for a great many years. This dude's done it all, and now he's the Beyonder in the Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur TV show that's coming out. Or
it's already out.
Already came out. Yeah.
Yeah, I watched the first episode just the other day with my daughter. She loves the comic book.
Yeah.
She's read most of the series, so we saw there was an animated series. We watched that first episode together. Very good, very cool animation, lots of style. It's just super silly and wacky just because of the concept of that character. It's truly something as weird as the MCU has gotten. I'm not sure Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur will be ripe for the live action integrated to the MCU. So I think making it a animated series was the right call, and it's a lot of fun. Big recommendation.
But yeah, so Laurence Fishburne's the Beyonder in that, folks. And also, Devil Dinosaur becoming a thing at all is just wild to me because he's one of those Jack Kirby creations that he wrote and drew for like 9 issues in the late 70s. And you're like, well, I guess we'll never see that again. And now this kind of revitalization it's seen by doing the Moon Girl and Devil Dinosaur thing. Because there's a Moon Boy with Devil Dinosaur the first time. So it was ripe for a kind of a rejigging there. But yeah, wild to see. It's one of those things that like, it's like when you see Rocket Raccoon and Groot on the screen, you're just kind of like,
yeah,
never thought we'd be here. So seeing Devil Dinosaur become a thing, seeing those wacky Jack Kirby creations take off is always fun. But so anyway, like I said, Fish has got tons of cred. He's Fish. There's nothing more to say.
Jada Pinkett Smith is Niobe. Now, she was in the previous film. We didn't talk about her much, but her role is greatly expanded here, I would say. Again, lots more real-world stuff. Lots of her piloting that ship. That is definitely her big heroic scene, is piloting it through the mechanical channel, which is very difficult to do, as we all know.
Yeah.
But she pulls it off, Andrew. And I really like her back and forth with Laurence Fishburne. I like that it's her in the driver's seat and Laurence Fishburne giving us the big reaction shots and the wide eyes of, wow, I can't believe like we're pulling this off. And she's the one in control. It's great stuff. I like her character arc where she is, ever since the last movie has always been, she'll help out Neo and the supporters in the crew, even if she doesn't fully believe in it. And that kind of continues here, but she really kind of starts to come around. And the Oracle tells her that she'll have to make a choice on helping Neo, and she decides to make that choice and finally decides to believe. And that belief is, of course, eventually rewarded. So it's a nice character arc. I think she plays this character very well. I had this thought, like watching. There's this part where the captain of the other ship, when Neo wants to take one, he's like, absolutely not. You're out of your mind. You're not going to tell me what to do with my ship. And then she, Niobe, offers up hers. And the captain, I was like, are you insane? And she's like, I know you're not going to question me after that speech that you just gave. And I loved her putting him in his place like that. And I like this. A bit of a tangent here, Andrew, but something that we've talked about before, and actually kind of recently, you and I off microphone, is the idea of the strong female character in movies, and how a lot of men writing film will tend to think of a strong female character as a woman who does the things a man typically does, and how limiting that is, and how that is kind of a version of a strong female character, but not the only way to write a female character. I think the female characters in this series are very well done, fully realized characters. They're action movies, they're piloting, they're fighting, they're doing all that stuff, but they're not defined by those things. And they are truly three-dimensional. Even some of the smaller characters, some characters that I'm not even sure like get names, are still seem to be fully realized characters, and a lot of them are female characters. I mean, all the Matrix movies are passing the Bechdel test. And I just think they're very well written characters. And it's one of those things where, the Wachowskis, as we know, since making these movies, have transitioned to be trans women. And looking back on it, you got to think that might be a reason that there is a strength to their writing, especially when it comes to the female characters. And it's overall, we can talk about it more but later, but the fact that the writers of the movie have had that transition, and you go back and look at some of the themes and how it seems to really coalesce and make sense with the lives, what they're going through, I think is all very interesting and worth exploring. But real quick, just for now, just want to shout out the female writing in this movie. As I'm not the ultimate judge of that, but from where I'm sitting, I think it is very well done.
I agree. No notes. You said it all. Yeah, no, not to say that I don't, obviously I have plenty of thoughts on that, but just that sums up exactly my thoughts. I think there's a lot to see in their early work that definitely informs their kind of personal journeys they made later in life. And like I said, I don't think any of it's a coincidence. And these movies do have obviously there's your lead characters, but they take the time and make a lot of the characters feel very developed, well thought out, especially throughout the course of the films. Niobe here gets to be the coolest driver on the planet. There's throughout the course, there's throughout the sequence where she's driving through these mechanical tunnels, which no one can pilot the tunnels or the mechanicals. Of
course not. We all know this.
No one can. It just reminds me of that old, man, those are some steep odds. Be a shame if some wrestler overcame them. But that idea that, throughout the course of that whole sequence, there's about 3 or 4 different instances where it's a dude going you can't do that. And then she proceeds to do it. And even the captain of the ship is they cut to him every 30 seconds or minute just so that he can comment on what's happening. Whoa, didn't know my ship could do this. Just really driving home that this character is doing something that a lot of these people didn't even realize that was possible. So I like the character a lot. Like I said, she gets a lot more to do here than she did in Reloaded to a degree. And it's all very cool.
Let's take a look at some of the supporting cast throughout this movie. Like the returning Monica Bellucci as Persephone and Lambert Wilson as the Merovingian, the Frenchman. We saw them first in the last movie, and they were just in one scene here, essentially cameos, but it's great to have them back, and a very memorable scene. Andrew, you'll notice that the Merovingian remarks that Trinity and the team fought through hell to see him. Did you know that is because the Merovingian is the devil himself, which is why he wears black and red, and his wife's name is Persephone? There's layers to all this stuff, Andrew. But
fun fact. Fun
yes.
fact. When he says hell, it is subtitled as HEL. So, yes.
That is fun. I don't know if we see it on screen, but it's called the Hell Club with 1 L is the name of that club.
Yeah.
I know that just from superfluous extra stuff. I don't know if we see a sign. Maybe I missed it as a sign somewhere that calls it that. But yeah, there's again just multiple meanings to everything in this movie. So much fun to dig through and watch these films again. But I love it. Even though it's one scene, it just encapsulates everything we know about these characters already. Like the Merovingians' cause and effect philosophy. And Persephone in particular, I love when Trinity is I'm not playing your games, and she kicks everyone's ass and holds a gun up to the Merovingian. Persephone watching is she's really getting a kick out of it and breathing heavily, enjoying it because she is fascinated with true love. And she knows that Trinity loves Neo in a way that the Merovingian does not love her, in a way that she is obsessed with. We know that from the last film, so her reaction to it here just makes a lot of sense. And it's just nice to have these characters back. I love the way these movies build out this big world in a way that you could have characters show up for 1 or 2 scenes, and it has an impact because of the world that was built, before that scene. So yeah, again, just a treat to have them again.
Yeah, like I said, just the one scene, but I'm never sad to see Monica Bellucci. Lambert will. I like she calls the Merovingian Merv at one point.
Yeah.
We apparently need to abbreviate his name at one point. Because, Merovingian is a long thing to keep saying. So, but yeah, just again, makes the world feel more fleshed out. Like, gives us a brief update on these characters after the events of Reloaded, and they're still doing their thing. Even if we did think maybe Persephone was about to make her own moves. Or maybe she knows something we don't. Who knows?
Mary Alice plays the Oracle this time around, taking over the role from Gloria Foster. And much like we were praising Ian Bliss for his ability to essentially emulate Hugo Weaving's performance, that's pretty similar to what Mary Alice has to do in this role. I mean, the mannerisms and demeanor of this character has already been defined by another actor, and she's got to come in and do that without feeling like she's merely doing an impression, a little bit make it her own, and I think she just hits that line perfectly. By the end of this movie, you kind of forget that she wasn't the Oracle all along, because the Oracle is... Yep. She had one scene in Reloaded, and then she's got a handful of scenes here, and is a real major player here. Like, this is a big role to have to take over, and I just think she does a great job. She's got that maternal quality about her, that loving grandmother that's baking cookies and hitting all the notes that you want from the Oracle. It's great stuff, and again, just truly impressive that she had to take over this role and does it as well as she does.
Agreed. Should also say, big rest in peace to Mary Alice. She passed away July of last year, and also retired from acting pretty much completely in 2005. Like, she has no film or anything credits past 2005. So had spent the 17 years after that seemingly happily retired. But like I said, it is a big thing, especially when you're dealing with a situation where these movies are coming out so close together and so rapid fire. To have the Oracle have to get recast it's got to be a daunting task to come into that. It's got to be a daunting task to have to even begin to try to be like, oh, well, who do you cast to replace the Oracle? Like, it's a tough situation for everyone involved, and they chose to go with a recast, and I think it is a good move. Obviously, I'm sure there could have been a way to potentially do the story without trying to use the Oracle, but at the same time, the Oracle's pretty important to Smith's arc in this film as well. And like I said, I think everybody nailed it. I think they made the right decision, and Mary Alice does a fantastic job stepping into that, continuing all those traits of the Oracle that you associate with it, without ever feeling like she's kind of doing like an impression or just trying to like exist in that same space. She finds a way to find that right balance. And like I said, it has a few more scenes here than the Oracle did in Reloaded, and makes the most of it. And like you said, by the end, you're kind of like, that's the Oracle. Some great scenes. We'll talk about those a little bit later, but yeah, great stuff.
And I like that the recast is acknowledged in the story of the film, because you could just not acknowledge it and we, the audience, know what's going on. But going one step farther for the characters, they see her differently and they acknowledge it. And she mentions that the choices she's made has had consequences and it's changed how she looks. And it's a little vague, but it's just enough to like acknowledge it. And I like the line with Neo later where he only recognizes parts of her. She's like, well, that's how it works. Some parts you keep, some parts you don't. And personally, I'm sure no one likes recasts in an ongoing series. Circumstances mean that it had to happen, but anytime a character is played by someone else, it's hard to get it out of your mind. So I like them addressing it head on. I think it's the right thing to do. It's kind of like in The Dark Knight, whenever they asked Maggie Gyllenhaal, like, oh, you look different. And she's like, well, I helped Batman, and that came with consequences. They just acknowledged it head on. So it wasn't weird at all.
What are those consequences, Maggie? But no, I agree. I think, like I said, they do acknowledge it. We're in a world of computer programs. It's not out of the realm of question for them to shift around and change things. And yeah, I do like that it was acknowledged. It made it feel a little bit more complete.
Colin Chow returns as Seraph, Oracle's protector, who we met in the previous movie. And in that last movie, that is about the extent of the character. He was always alongside the Oracle, He was sort of the gateway before Neo could meet with her again. And in this movie, gets to get in on the action just a little bit more, helping save Neo from the aforementioned Hell's Club. And I love this character. And again, I've said it a million times, but even the smallest characters just have these defining traits about them. Like Colin Chow not getting a ton of screen time or even a ton of dialogue, but has such a distinct look with those glasses and the white robe that it just becomes a memorable character with their limited screen time. It reminds me of like the very first movie with Switch, who was always like my favorite member of the team outside the main cast. The 3 lines in the movie, maybe a very memorable death scene, but just such a distinct look that it makes them stand out. And the more you can elevate your minor characters like that, I think the stronger the film is as a whole. And Colin Chow, no different. A very accomplished martial artist and martial arts actor. I mean, look at their credits. Just tons and tons of films, ranging from Hollywood stuff to true kung fu films. And again, small role, but memorable. Colin Chow as Seraph.
Yeah, this is a good performance. Like I said, he gets plenty of action, gets to look cool while doing it. Like I said, creating a unique visual, because so many, especially like Switch, always standing out was super interesting. And again, probably a sign of maybe things to come. The character's name is literally Switch. Are
you referring to the original intention of the character? Have you heard that?
Yes, the original intention of the character, I believe, was that in the real world they were one gender, and in the Matrix they were the opposite gender.
Yeah,
is that
very
correct?
cool concept. Like,
yeah,
that's
there's absolutely zero reason that couldn't be the case. Like, I don't think they do that with anyone in Resurrections, but maybe they should have. But yeah, like you said, Switch doesn't do a whole lot in the first movie, but stands out to a unique visual sense. And obviously the death scene being as iconic as it is. But yeah, I like Seraph. Like I said, not a whole lot to do through either of these films, but manages to stand out in a bunch of films where there's a lot of people standing out. So it's impressive to be able to do that.
Shout out to the Blank Check podcast, a very good movie podcast. If you listen to ours, I'm sure you certainly know about that podcast already. But while talking about the Matrix films, going into them, one of the hosts, David Sims, who's a film critic, was a big fan of the movies, whereas Griffin Newman was a little bit more mixed on them and kind of just not really getting the appeal. And whenever they talk about the character of Seraph, Griffin Newman was like, well, you know, they have this fight scene for no reason, just to get a fight scene in the movie. Like, what are they doing here? And David Sims was like, well, remember, Seraph is a program, and Neo has to interact with him before getting to the Oracle. Essentially, Seraph is a password screen. He's a CAPTCHA. And then, like, that just clicked something for Griffin, and he's like, oh, wait, these movies are great. Seraph is a password screen. So, like, any other time discussing the movies, like, something, he had something to praise. He's like, oh, of course, yes. Seraph is a password screen. And that just kind of became, like, an ongoing thing. Oh, these movies are great. Seraph is a password screen. It's like, it is, but that was always stuck with me. I never, as much as I watch these movies, that particular connection isn't one that I made, but yeah, there's always something extra to read into all these characters, and it makes the rewatchability quite high, in my opinion.
I agree.
A couple more newcomers. We have Tanveer Atwal as the character of Sati, who is the young girl we meet early on in this movie, a young program who also gets referred to as the Last Exile, which is a super cool moniker. I was kind of curious what the influence of that was. There is an anime that came out the same year called The Last Exile. I don't know if that's a direct reference or it's just a cool sounding name, as she is the last one to escape the Machine City before the end. But regardless, cute kid, good performance, and would go on to be a recurring character in this series, surprisingly. So we'll get to talk about the character again in a couple of weeks, but played very well, very sweetly by young Tanveer here.
I agree.
Her father, the program known as Ramachandra, played by Bernard White, a longtime character actor in Hollywood. Listeners might also remember him from Captain America, the Winter Soldier. He's one of the members of the National Board, I forget what that organization is called, but got a few key scenes there, but I like his little performance here. I mean, again, tons of characters with one or two scenes that are just very memorable, and him explaining that love is just a word. Like I think about that all the time because Neo is having a hard time grasping the concept of a program risking their lives to save their daughter. And how could a program love another program? Because that's a human emotion. And he corrects him. He goes, no, love is a word. What matters is the meaning, the connection that it implies. And that's just a beautiful way to look at it. Again, as we know by now, the series, as it goes on, continues to break the walls down between humans and programs and machines. And Neo is, even at this point, still learning. Still trying to look at the world in too black and white of a fashion, and learning that there's less differences and more nuance than he is aware of. So, again, just a very memorable one-moment scene, but such a kind performance.
I agree. Yeah, this is one of those really philosophical type moments where we're again kind of understanding that the reality of this situation with the machines is not as the previous movie plays a lot with that nuance. This movie kind of takes it out of nuance and makes it kind of a little bit more of the forefront, especially as we get to the kind of the final confrontation where the machines can no longer control Smith. And but yeah, this is a very kind, warm performance. We do not see him again. We do see Sati again after this, but we do not see him again. But it is a great little performance at this kind of interesting place, this train station that Neo is kind of at, which is kind of this weird version of Limbo, as it is in this.
And
film.
what's the name of the train station, Andrew? What's it say on the wall?
Oh, is it a thing that if you rearrange it, it just says Limbo?
Yeah, it's Mobile Avenue, but no E on mobile. Mobile is an anagram of Limbo.
Anagram, that was the word. Thanks, Chris.
Did you know Neo is an anagram of one? There's layers to everything, Andrew.
Chris, do you know I don't give a flying
Hashtag PP.
Hashtag PP.
Speaking of that train station, how about Bruce Spence as the train man? Memorable performances, right? I love this guy's look. I mean, it stands out against so many of these characters who all look badass in sleek leather and sunglasses. And he looks like Christopher Lloyd from Dennis the Menace.
Oh, God.
That's always what he's reminding me
that
of.
Is a cut, Chris. That is a cut. That is
I love it. I love the way he talks. I love how he is in control in the train station because he built that place. And down here, I'm God. It's all great stuff. Another journeyman actor. I mean, dude's got credits going back to the 70s. He's in Mad Max 2 and 3. He's in the 90s sci-fi classic Dark City, which is a major influence on the Matrix films. And I gotta think might be one of the reasons he shows up here. And the same year this movie comes out, he voices Chum in Finding Nemo. He was one of the sharks. So just a lot of variety there.
And he's also the mouth of Sauron in the extended version of Lord of the Rings, Return of the King, which came out in 2003 as well. Also was a voice in Star Wars Episode 3. So this guy's nerd credit is off the charts.
Long line at his booth at the con, I tell you what.
Exactly. And then was even in the Children of the Corn film that came out a couple of years ago. So he's got Stephen King credit as well. So it's happening, folks. Expect it later this year. Yeah, you mentioned the Christopher Lloyd character from Dennis the Menace, which is definitely a character that fits in with what I was about to say. But as I'm looking at his character, and I for some reason immediately thought of Danny DeVito's Penguin, and now I think of Christopher Lloyd and Dennis the Menace, where I'm reminded of a line that you once told me, Chris. Imagine the smell.
Gross. But yes.
It's just like all three of these guys look so disgusting, and man, I cannot. I must have buried that in my brain because I know I watched that Dennis the Menace movie as a kid many, many times. Walter Matthau as Mr. Wilson, and Christopher Lloyd is our weird drifter villain. But that campfire scene where he's
Yes,
like
yes,
making
eating the beans. That
and-
is like my number one memory of that movie. Yes.
Oh my
Eating
god.
the beans right out of the can, yeah.
So gross. And man, just imagine the smell, Chris.
You add beans to the mix.
Oh, your chances of surviving drastic go down.
Harry Lennox is returning as Commander Locke, commander of the military. Andrew, here's what I love about this performance and this character. They are very, I hesitate to use the word stereotypical, but they're the leader of the army. They are all about combat and militia, and we need all of our defenses, all hands on deck. He's got a line where he's like, "For up to me, I put a gun into every man, woman, and child here and march them out to the dock." And he's the type of like general commander that we've seen in movies a lot, but typically I don't like that character. Typically I find them a bit antagonistic, but I don't feel that way about Commander Locke, because I get it. This is like the last stand of humanity. You want to do all you can to protect it, and their methods are more extreme than most. And then he does not believe in the prophecy, believe in the one or anything like that, whereas others do. In particular, going back to that scene where he's like, I would put a gun in everybody's hands, and if it was up to him, and the council says, well, then it's a good thing that it is not up to you. I love that scene because it's like a microcosm of a running theme throughout this. You ready for more themes and messages, Andrew?
What?
Where it's like his philosophy, I don't find inherently wrong, even if I disagree with it. But I feel the same way about the council. And they're kind of right in like a middle line where they're like allowing him to have his defenses and kind of having hope for Neo and kind of just keeping him in check, right? And it's like these two philosophies clashing and finding a balance in that clash, which we see show up over and over again throughout these movies, where it's the humans and their way of life and machines and their way of life, and where they meet, where they clash, and how it balances. Or you have these anomalies in this version of the Matrix, with Neo falling in love with Trinity clashing against another anomaly, which is Smith breaking free of his control. And those two come to a head at the end of this movie. This clashing of ways of life and philosophy, and the balance that's caused between it. And you can look at it as chaos, or you can look at it as fate, and neither way is wrong. It's just different. And there's just something to chew on every single time I watch these movies. But Harry Lennox embodying that military first mindset that we've seen before, I think he plays it with just enough humanity and nuance that that I still find it likable, but I don't always feel that way.
Yeah, it's a tough line to ride, because he's kind of the one that's like having to seemingly face kind of the reality of the situation. Like, you've got Morpheus in this heavy belief in Neo, you've got others that are trying to do their plans. Well, he's the one that's kind of like, yeah, but at the end of the day, we still have to defend the city. Like, he's trying to ride that line. And in a way, most of his suspicions and concerns end up proving correct in a real sense, because even the kind of final run EMP by the hammer still results in the machines like breaking through, and it ultimately results in a situation that if Neo doesn't get to his destination, he's completely correct. The city gets overrun, and the machines are going to kill them all. But the way the character is typically portrayed, it is easy to create them as being unlikable, and he's definitely presented as an obstacle more than, like, he doesn't believe, and he's kind of a problem for that reason. But at the same time, like you said, I think he finds the exact right balance. And Harry Lennox himself, I mean, obviously he's a tremendous character actor. Been around got credits back to the late 80s. Has been around forever. Was more recently seen in Zack Snyder's Justice League trilogy, which they like to call it that for some reason. Showed up there as General Swanwick before ultimately being revealed as the Martian Manhunter. And people claim that he may have a cameo in The Flash. We'll see. But either way, a great performance. Yeah.
Rounding out these supporting characters, we have Nathaniel Lees, Captain Mifune, and Clayton Watson as the kid. He's only ever called the kid. As we mentioned, his origin is in the Animatrix, but we see him in both of these films as a young, we learn, 16-year-old that is just eager to do anything he can to help the cause. And I love the bond that they form in this movie. Again, I'm becoming a broken record here, but there's just a few key scenes with them. But the movie does so much to make them fully realized characters and make us care about them and their relationship with one another. I love when they first meet on the deck and the kid like drops all the ammo that he's carrying. And the dialogue exchange that they have where the captain walks up and says, "What's a pod-born pencil neck like you doing volunteering for my corps?" And first off, I love in-universe insults. Like pod-born is like a dig at people that were all born in pods, as opposed to natural-born people of Zion. So I love hearing that little insult thrown in there into this world. But whenever he sees that this kid has, he's got oomph, he's got it, he's got that drive, he gives him a chance. And then they have another scene later during the captain's death scene, which is very sweet. And the captain being a minor character, we only have a handful of scenes. Because of that relationship, we care about his death scene, and it's got weight to it and meaning. And it's just, I can't praise the writing of the characters enough in these movies. Even small, minor ones like this have an impact, have a meaning. So credit to the writers, and of course, credit to our actors as well for bringing them to life.
Yeah, I do really like Captain Mifune's performance here. I assume this character is named after Toshiro Mifune, legendary Japanese actor of Akira Kurosawa's films and plenty of others. And there's definitely a presentation to this character that feels very similar to some of his. But yeah, he gives a big rousing speech before they kind of have their final standoff against the machines. And like you said, he fights to the end. And like you said, we'll talk a little bit more about the scenes later, but the moment he has with Kid right at his death it's touching, it's heartfelt, and it empowers the kid to kind of finish the mission. And it's great. Like I said, Clayton Watson also doing a great job here. Like I said, you're interested in where this character comes from and why he is attached to Neo so much. The Animatrix does have the short that explains that to a degree. Wouldn't necessarily go as far as to say that like you're missing that information. I think Neo just says he saved himself, and I think that's just kind of how you're supposed to view it. But if you do want a little bit more information there, the Animatrix does expand on that. But yeah, we have a couple of other people that do also return. Like I said, Gina Torres is there. Anthony Zerbe is still there, but all of them were pretty limited in this time around to just cameos. But Nathaniel Lees in particular definitely stands out to me. A great performance with some limited screen time and kind of a real great exercise in how to make a minor character feel important in your film.
Well, Andrew, that's our cast. Let's talk about the scenes of this film, and particularly all of our favorite scenes and the best scenes, starting with the high point, our personal favorite scene of the movie. So, Andrew, in your opinion, when is this movie firing on all cylinders? What is your favorite scene of The Matrix Revolutions?
I got to go with our climax, Superman versus Brainiac. It's obviously, folks, I'm joking. But it's our final Smith.
But kind of. Like the joke, but also, come on here.
A little bit.
I have called this fight the best live-action Superman fight on film. I think I stand by that. I've also heard people say it's the best, like Dragon Ball Z fight, or I'm blanking on the main character's name of that series, but
Goku.
Goku. Yeah, I'm not familiar with it, but if that's your take on this, sure, I'll agree with that too.
The joke I've always heard is that Man of Steel is the best Dragon Ball Z movie they've made. But But here, but for me, this is kind of, it's the culmination of everything in a way. This is this whole story in a way from day one has pretty much been from that, from that interrogation scene in the first one to this is a steady building crescendo where Smith has become this ever increasing presence that is slowly taking control of everything. And now Neo knows that he's defeated Smith once, and now he has to do it again. And the question being this time, can he do it again? And it's fantastic. It's in the Matrix. It's raining. We all know fights look 3 times as cool when they're in the rain. And they're fighting through this essentially abandoned city since the streets are kind of just all Smiths. So it's brutal. It's awesome. It's got great choreography, but at the same time, it doesn't shy away from just doing some big, bombastic, effects-heavy stuff. And it's awesome. It's a great mix also of practical and CGI. There is a lot of practical stuff in this fight. A lot of the fight is presented in essentially as real terms as it can be, with the CGI just spared for very, very key moments, like the slow motion punch where you see the ripples across Smith's face. But I liked that about it. I remembered this fight being a lot more CGI than it is. And I think I was confusing it with the playground scene, the playground fight, where I think that one leans a little bit more into CGI, whereas this one definitely leans more into the practical. It has plenty of callbacks to some of his fights with other people throughout the course of the film, including his previous fights with Smith. And it's just, if you're gonna have the films build to something, you can't do it much better than this.
Yeah, I agree. I'm also picking this as my favorite scene. I love this whole movie. I love this whole series. I've talked about it, but the way it really does build to this. I love all the scenes in this movie, but it's building to this fight because, like you said, Smith is kind of in the background, but you always feel his presence. You know he's there. You know he's copying himself and taking over the Matrix. You know that's going to matter and come up at some point, and it finally comes to a head here. You've got like this conflict between humans and the machines, and then like this wild card, which is the program Smith. And man, I love Neo making his pitch to the machine world. In particular, the line, "The program Smith has grown beyond your control." It's just so cool. And they help him enter the Matrix, and they have this fight. And it's not an easy thing. Like, you've got two all-powerful beings. How can you have stakes? How can you make us believe they can hurt each other? And the answer is you destroy an entire city. You fly through the air. It's so cool to have it raining because it's so dramatic. But like that big punch they have midair that makes that sphere of the water as it pushes it back and then it falls down. Just such cool physics at play. I love when he dives into the ground and creates a mud pit. It really reminds me of The Dark Knight Returns and this great line about fighting in a mud pit. But it's just great stuff. That slow motion punch, you can tell it's CG, but it's so fun. Who cares? But as you said, tons of practical. I mean, whenever they are spitting through the air, throwing punches at each other, that is practical. They have this, if you watch the behind the scenes, they have these big like cranes with a like a circle around their waist that allows them to spin freely. And they're both suspended in the air in apparently a very uncomfortable harness, from what the actors say. And just doing these takes over and over again, spinning through the air. Then you just, a little bit of computer magic to make them actually in the air. But it still is practical. Whenever Neo jumps against the wall and pushes off of it for momentum, and those cracks show up on the wall, that's practical. The practical effect on that wall smashing as he launches away. And of course, tons of wire work, and it's great. It's again, I mentioned it last episode, but one of the knocks that these sequels get is like the CG doesn't hold up. And yeah, maybe, but CG is the body replacement CG is such a small part of it that so much of this movie is practical in a way that you don't see it anymore, Andrew. They don't make them like they used to. Marvel movies are such an easy comparison because that's the big tentpole blockbusters of today. and I enjoy the Marvel movies. But you watch the newest Ant-Man, and you know, in your mind, you know that none of this stuff is real. None of these environments is real. And you go back and watch a movie like this, and Zion, the machine city of Zion, as they're crawling through the tunnels or coming off their ship, like it's all real to set, and it's tangible, and you can feel it. In this final fight, there are real actors throwing punches at each other in a real mud hole set, and it makes a difference. And I think for that reason, the effects of this movie, of this series, have indeed aged very well. But I agree. My favorite scene, I love the answer. I love the climax. I love the finale. I mean, it's been building up that, as the Oracle puts it, Smith is Neo's opposite, his negative. Could you see, Andrew? Neo is 1. That would make Smith -1. And whenever you combine 1 and -1, you get 0. You get both of them eliminated, which is what happened.
What?
But I love that. I love that they fight, but at the end of the day, what do you think's going to happen? Do you think Neo can really punch Smith so hard that he destroys him? Of course, it's not going to be the answer. The answer is letting go, letting Smith copy him, giving the machines access to the agent, the program of Smith, and deleting it and canceling each other out. I think it's a cool end to this fight. Man, I love Smith. He's so unhinged in this movie, but I love his speech when Neo just won't give up. He's got the eyes of the Oracle. He sees the end, what he thinks is the end, where Neo is supposed to stay down, and he doesn't. And he just doesn't understand. And he asks him, "Why, Mr. Anderson? Why? Why do you do it? Why do you get up? Why keep fighting? Do you believe you're fighting for something? For more than your survival? Can you tell me what it is? Do you even know?" And he's just losing his mind that Neo is choosing to continue this fight, this human part of him that as a program, he just cannot understand, and ends up being his undoing. I also love whenever he is getting deleted. Very cool visual where like the light is shining from behind all the Smith's glasses. Looks very cool. But I love when a villain is defeated and they're just so pathetic. This all-powerful Smith is just reduced to saying, no, it's not fair, as he knows what's going to happen.
Fair.
He's just so, yeah. For him to complain about something not being fair, right, after all that he's done. But I love an all-powerful villain turning into just pathetic garbage before they get their comeuppance. I find that very satisfying. So yeah, I agree, Andrew. My favorite scene in the movie. How could it be anything else?
Yeah, I mean, it's a great, fantastic sequence. But like I said, I always love when a villain is like, "It's not fair," and I'm like, man, good thing my dad's not around. My dad just appears. Well, it's not fair. But it's always it also is, I guess, meant to just illustrate how fragile the power fantasy actually is, because when everything's going their route, it's fantastic. They have no issues, but the minute they finally get opposed or the minute they get defeated, suddenly it's not fair. And like I said, the way this kind of all caps off is, he allows himself to be copied, but then Smith doesn't have the foresight to realize that it's the machines that plugged him in, and that gives the machines access to Neo and, as such, Smith. And it's his undoing. And ultimately, it leads to a reboot of the Matrix, as it were, with many of the programs still intact. And we get a hope for the future, where not Sean Connery comes back to say, "How long do you think peace will last?" But it's my favorite scene in the movie. Like I said, I did not remember it very well, and just even rewatching it and just seeing just how practical this fight was just a treat. It was great. I thought it was a fantastic final fight, and definitely one of the more brutal final fights you'll see in a film like this. But great stuff. I love it.
Last thing I'll say about the scene is I love the beginning where they have the showdown in the street and they start running at one another. The Wachowskis do something very cool where they break a rule of filmmaking. Typically, when you're shooting a scene, there's a 180-degree rule. Your camera can only be within 180 degrees. So in other words, if you have two characters talking to each other, your character on the left should be on the left in every single shot that you do. Character on the right should remain on the right. It's just a visual language of filmmaking. And they break that rule here because sometimes Neo is running from the left and Smith is on the right. And then they will switch it by putting the camera on the opposite side. And as they collide and start punching, they are switching sides, Neo on the left, Smith on the left, and vice versa, because they are each other's opposites. They break the rule for a narrative purpose, which is one of my favorite things in filmmaking. Using your editing or rule breaking to further enhance the story. It's why Memento is one of my favorite films. There's a movie, Stay, that I praise all the time, that basically the entire movie is built around these rule breaking shots, and it's just I love it. It's a fun, nerdy little treat every time I see him do something like that.
Yeah, it's I definitely took some classes in college where there was a professor who really tried to drill in like the 180-degree rule and all these other things, and you definitely see movies that find creative ways to break it. And I mean, the ultimate thing at the end of the day is like the 180 rule is it's a rule of filmmaking, but there's always reasons to break rules. There's a song on Daft Punk's last album, Random Access Memories, that has Giorgio Moroder doing this like brief little speech before they go into a song that he plays on, and he mentions how once he dispensed with the notions of what he thought was correct in music, he was finally kind of able to move forward and kind of be the musician that he wanted to be once he stopped doing what was correct. Because music is a very similar thing. I took music classes where they were like, use these chords and build this out, but there's rules in music. And don't get me wrong, they definitely sound more pleasing to the ear when you follow them correctly, but at the same time, music is what it is, and film is the same way. You can have all these hard set rules, but at the end of the day, if you think you have something interesting that doesn't abide by them, I encourage you to not follow them in that case, because I think there is more to be found in experimentation than playing by the rules.
Well said, Andrew. I love that this deep into the franchise, a third movie, we're still getting fight scenes within the Matrix specifically, but it's action scenes in general that we have not seen before. That first movie really establishes that, speaking of rules, there can be no rules. Some rules can be broken. Some can be bent. I mean, I think it's a line from the first movie, but you've got this premise where you can kind of do whatever you want in your action scenes when you're within the Matrix. And they explore it in that first movie. We get bullet time and these cool flips and motion and things we've never seen before. And now, 3 movies in, we're still getting like new, fun, inventive fights. Like the lobby of the Hell Club, where they check your guns. And then all of the villains are about to fight. Just ignore gravity, and they all leap to the ceiling, and we see them leaping from wall to wall. And so we have not seen up until this point. And the fact that they can still be so creative and inventive with their action scenes, again, just tons of praise to the Wachowskis for coming up with all of this stuff. And the amount of Matrix content released in 2003, we talked about last episode, 2 feature-length films, the Animatrix, the video game with 40 minutes of exclusive footage. I mean, they did so much in this world, and it still feels fresh up until the end. Just truly remarkable.
I agree. It is interesting to just see how hard they went on this as a new franchise, especially at the time. But the Matrix was this big, massive hit, and they wanted to make the most of it. And I definitely think they got their money's worth. Don't get me wrong. I know the returns on this movie weren't as high as they may have liked, but there's still, between all of the associated media, this was a massive, massive thing. And it really was like, I was in high school when this was all coming out. So, I mean, like, The Matrix was everything for lots of people. I remember my friend when he first described them, because I know I did not see The Matrix in theaters, because that was 2099. '99. So I was only 12. So I don't think my parents were. I don't think my parents were taking me to R-rated movies when I was 12. But
Shout
I
out
remember.
to my Aunt Tammy for taking me to The Matrix in theaters. R-rated movie. Very cool of you to do so. I liked it. Didn't understand it. I promise you that. But I thought the special effects were very cool.
So. But I remember my friend trying to describe the first Matrix to me, and he did a terrible job at it. He was like, "Dude, have you seen the Matrix?" And I was like, "No, what's the Matrix?" And he's like, "So like, 1999 is like a dream," and I was like, "What?" And I was like, "What are you talking about?" And he's like, "And then you can like, it's like, so the main guy gets like taken out of the dream, but like they can keep going back into it." And I was like, do they just fall back asleep? I don't. What's how? It's like I didn't. I had no clue what he was talking about. It was the most ridiculous thing in the world. And finally, I saw it later. I think my parent probably saw it on TV or something. But I finally saw it later, and I was like, oh. And I even told him as much. I was like, you did a terrible job explaining that. Absolutely awful. But yeah. So it really Matrix. I remember people being like. So the first one is in like, it's like the summer of 2003, and then the other one's in the fall, right? So we got to make sure we go, everybody was like making sure they knew when they came out so they could go see them. And I was like, man, what a wild time. You just don't like, I don't know. I just feel like we don't get hyped about things like that like we did before. Endgame is really probably the only recent thing I can think of where there was like a ton of hype about something new that was coming out. But that was after, 7 years of films with, tons of build-ins. So, yeah, wild times.
We get some scenes of the Oracle like back in her apartment that we saw from the first one, back in her kitchen specifically, making cookies with Sati. And I love returning the Oracle to this, to her home. And I love, we got like two scenes here because we have Neo come and visit her. And she has this classic Oracle line where he walks in and she says, I was hoping to have these done before you got here. It's so funny because, like, she's the Oracle. She's all knowing. She knew she wouldn't have them done. And she's just so humanizing, but also, like, you can tell, like, she's just playing with him, Like, she's just playing with Neo, who is still so black and white and not seeing the nuance, having a little line like that I get a dig out of. And shortly after Neo visits, Smith comes for her. And Smith takes Seraph and Sati, and then they have a showdown in her kitchen. And Andrew, got to be the biggest laugh in the movie when Smith just grabs the plate of cookies and throws them against the wall. Yep. Maybe you knew I'd do that. Maybe you didn't. It's
like a child's response. Yeah.
Yes.
It's like
yes. It's so fun.
And in a way, Smith is a child. Like, it really is. Like, first off, he does call the Oracle mom at one point in that scene.
Yeah.
Which, I don't know if that's being creepy or if he's being genuine. I don't know. But the idea in a way is that all these things that Smith is experiencing are like a child's response, like to things. Like they, he is a child because he is experiencing all these things for the first time. So like that would be like a child's response of like, oh, I can take over everything, or I can take over other stuff. I should just take over the whole world. Then I can just it'll be me everywhere. And then like by extension, just that idea that, I can control everything, therefore I will. It is kind of a very base level response. But like I said, that scene where he throws the cookies is kind of chief among kind of exposing the childlike nature of the character in a way and kind of how he interacts with things. Also, this movie made me shockingly aware of Hugo Weaving's teeth. And they
the way like he again that laugh, that maniacal laugh, really he pulls back his lips and just
like he exposes his whole mouth. He looks like he's about to swallow me. But first off, the first time I saw that, he pulled like his mouth back and showed his teeth. I was like, your teeth look too thick. And now I'm uncomfortable having said that out loud.
Damn, them teeth is thick.
Damn, them teeth thick with 3 C's. But yeah, like, and then during the fight with Neo, you get it again where I'm just like, dude, what is up with your teeth? I don't feel like I saw them this much in Lord of the Rings.
As much as I love, the final fight within the Matrix with Neo and Smith going 1-on-1 or 1 on a million, as much as I love the Matrix action scenes, we get the most, by far, real world action scenes in this movie that we've seen so far, and I think it is all fantastic. No surprise. I there's just two that come to mind where it's Bane versus Trinity and Neo aboard the Nebuchadnezzar, aboard Niobe's ship that they're taking, and
The Logos.
The Logos. Thank you. And I love the fight, the shot in particular where Bane and Neo are fighting over that gun, and they shoot it like in an arc over their heads, and like that's like the only light in the room that lights them up. Just a very cool visual. But I love the moment where Bane is revealing who he really is, and he's like, "We've been here before, you and I." And Bane has Smith has a very telling line when he says, "I think of nothing else." And sort of his obsession with control and taking over the One and getting revenge for what he did to him. I love how menacing he says, "There's nowhere I can't go, nowhere I can't find you." And Neo has that realization and says it's impossible, and he says, "Not impossible, inevitable."
Yep.
Very cool.
Perfect.
Again, so much praise plays to Ian Bliss for being able to pull this off.
Man,
And
it is just unbelievable what Ian Bliss does with this. Like,
Yes.
he literally, like, if you just told me that was Hugo Weaving with, like, we changed his hair and did these, like, slight prosthetics to make him look different, like, I would have believed it. Like, it's not just, it's in the speech patterns, it's in the body language, it's in with, like, just even when he's just, like, sitting, it's like the dude, like, just studied Hugo Weaving for years. Like it reminds me of that, obviously in a serious way, but like that old MTV Movie Awards sketch where like Ben Stiller is Tom Cruise's stunt double. And they're just talking about how he embodies Tom Cruise and he thinks everything about him. Like, that's literally what I think was happening here, but like unironically, because it's just like everything about it is perfect. There's just that slight physical difference, and it only feels slight in so many ways because I think so much else is perfect. I'm sure if I saw these men standing next to each other, I would be like, how did I ever think that these guys were the same person? But it's so good and so perfect, and it just comes down to like there's just this sliver of difference, and it just speaks to the filmmaking ability, obviously the performance of Ian Bliss, obviously the iconic nature of Hugo Weaving's performance to be able to emulate it in a way that makes it so identifiable. Like, there's so many layers to how perfect that had to be on every level that the fact it all comes together and works is like nothing short of Herculean. That it comes off, and then it ends up being such a minor thing in the grand scheme of things. Like, but for me, it's one of the most standout parts of the last two movies, just how much this dude sounds and looks like Hugo Weaving as Agent Smith. It's absolutely ridiculous, but props to everyone involved for making it happen, because it would have been easy to just have anybody in the real world be the Agent Smith analog, and you wouldn't have to worry about them looking alike or anything. But the fact they went the full 9 with it, I was like, yeah, excellent. 10 out of 10.
I love once Neo loses his eyes and he learns of this other sight that he has, and the visual of what Neo now sees kind of like in the gold, almost code-like. It's very cool, but in particular when he sees Smith, and when he sees him in this way, he sees Smith. He sees Hugo Weaving in a suit whenever he looks at Bane. And it's very cool. And in particular, I want to shout out when he finally kills Bane. You see it in the Smith form. He essentially cuts his head in half. Like, it's pretty brutal. But they don't show you the violence. They show you the Smith, again, ethereal kind of form getting destroyed, which is so much cooler, so much more impactful. It would have been so jarring to see something like truly gory in these movies. And it made me realize that these movies, the violence, the action is so stylized that I think they're only rated R because of the language, which it's kind of crazy, impressive that the studio didn't push to make these PG-13, because I don't think you have to change much. I think you drop the F words, limit your S words, and I think you're like almost there. And the movies probably have a bigger return at the box office. So it is wild.
What does swords have to do with this?
What?
Sorry, you said S words, and I just made a deep cut
Swords.
SNL Jeopardy reference. I mean, they do use swords in these movies, but
I thought you said Zords, like Power Rangers.
Oh,
I'm like, Andrew,
no,
where is this
no.
coming from?
no,
Um,
no. Swords.
but it's impressive how much creative control, essentially, brand new filmmakers in the Wachowskis got to exert in these movies and got to make them rated R. When there's again, it's not hard to imagine these as PG-13, but they got away with it.
Yeah, it's like I said, there's a lot going on, but I think, and yeah, I always wonder when I see things that like I watch and I'm like, oh, it was rated R. That seems a little strange. But at the same time, I have no idea if I've just been desensitized to like what violent actually is. So that when I watch something, I have no idea if it's actually bad or not. But I do think that maybe a little less blood and a few less cursing, you probably could have done these as PG-13. But at the same time, I'm glad that they allowed the Wachowskis to make these movies as they saw fit. And just kind of believed. I mean, the first movie made, it was the highest grossing R-rated film until Deadpool came out. So that's a 15. No. Chris, when did Deadpool come out? 14?
16?
16? I have time as a flat circle. But it's but yeah, it's wild to think that for, 13 years no R-rated film grossed higher than this, which again just speaks to the hype was going into Matrix Reloaded and then as such Matrix Revolutions. So yeah, these days I feel like they definitely, well, then again, I think Resurrections was still rated R, wasn't it?
We'll find out in a couple weeks.
We will.
Definitely can't look it up now.
Okay, absolutely not. That would be work.
And then the other big action set pieces taking place in the real world are on the dock of Zion, as the Sentinels are breaking through. I love I think they call them APUs, the little units that they get in that mimic their arms, the mech suits essentially that they get in. Huge anime influence here. I love the design of those guys. The swarm of the Sentinels coming through, because at first they're kind of keeping up with them, and then once like they all start coming through and they move in a swarm and overtake the dock, is truly terrifying stuff. I love the giant drill, and we have a character. I had to look up their name real quick. The character's name is Chara, played by Rachel Blackman, and she's the one with the rocket launcher trying to take the drill down. She has this wonderful line. Before she shoots it, she says, "Dig this." It's really good, Andrew. Good action.
Yes, very
action
good
movie stuff. But what I want to say about this is going back to the practicality of it all. Like this place feels so mechanical and tangible and real, and a lot of miniature use happens here. Which again, I know I sound like an old man, but it's kind of a lost art. It's not something you see very often. It's really good miniature use, but. This dock, they have a miniature version of it. There's a lot of shots used in the film of the miniatures, and it just feels so tactile and tangible, and I think it's all really well done.
Yeah, there's a lot of really, really great action sequences here, especially as like the Sentinels start piling up. You just have these piles of mechanical, rubbish. Is that the word I'm looking for? No?
Yeah. Sure, Andrew.
Oh. What am I looking for? Chris, what's the word I'm thinking of?
Piles of mechanical...
Chris, I don't know. Anyway.
Debris?
Got all these piles. Debris, there it is. Oh, no. Oh, no. Anyway. This is all... it just creates, like I said, it's a very tactile sense where it feels a lot more real. This is something they do with green screens and CGI now. But, and again, I don't want to be like old man yells at cloud, although I kind of am being old man yells at cloud. But I ain't that old. So shut your mouth. But but I do love this whole sequence. Captain Mifune gets some great sequence. Like he hypes up the APU guys right before their big fight, and then he's fighting to the very end. I love this whole performance. I love his tenacity. I love the gravitas he brings to such a minor role, and then his final kind of death sequence where he's talking to the kid, and he tells the kid, he's like, you need to get that gate open because otherwise it's not gonna work. Although, folks, EMPs would work through that door. All they
Yeah,
have to
but
do
they,
is
they
stop.
wouldn't live crashing through, though.
They just stop at the gate and hit the EMP. Yeah.
You're watching
Not
the movie
to
wrong,
discount
Andrew.
everyone's hard work. 'Cause I'm about to talk about the chase sequence too. But the kid just says, he's like, I didn't finish the training course, and Captain Mifune says, neither did I.
I love
And
that
you know
little
what?
moment between the two of them. That's so cool.
It's the empowering moment. The kid needs to stand up and do his thing, and I love it. It's fantastic. But like I said, the sequence before this that I also want to shout out is the sequence where Jada Pinkett Smith's character Niobe is driving the hammer through this mechanical conduit, basically, and it's tight quarters. It's the run that no one's supposed to be able to do because it's impossible, and she does it. Like I said, we get all the running commentary from the captain, who's shocked at the capabilities of his own ship. Even Morpheus is just like, wow, you're a heck of a driver. And like everyone is just blown away that Niobe is able to do this. But it is still very thrilling. The way they choose to maneuver the ship through a lot of these corners and turns and things is very unique, creates interesting and unique visuals. And it's just a really, really cool sequence of events. And yeah, it's awesome.
You know, being the third film in a trilogy, it of course has to open with our fan favorite hero being captured and presumed dead by some, and our other heroes have to start the movie by rescuing them. That's what you do. That's Star Wars Episode 6. That's Pirates of the Caribbean 3. It's a very specific trope, but the second movie has to end with our hero
Chris, why
being
you gotta do that?
presumed gone, perished, or captured, and you gotta start your third movie by rescuing them.
I guess. Does Godfather 3 follow this rule? Yeah, it definitely does. But
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
absolutely. I think it's even on an alien planet. But yeah, I do like all this train station stuff. We talked about it quite a bit already, just through the nature of a lot of the characters there. But I think this was just a visually distinctive, because the Matrix kind of got, it was a joke that every sequence in the Matrix was tinged green, which was not unintentional, but definitely feels like it got amped up for the sequels to create a much cleaner sense, because almost the whole first movie has a lot of sequences in the Matrix. But the sequels kind of got that joke that everything was just tinged green, and that was how you made stuff feel, it's a Matrix scene, it's tinged green. And even
Andrew, this was actually a deliberate choice to show that the Matrix was being destroyed and coming apart, and the code was showing through. That's why it became progressively greener.
I'm choosing to believe that you're not lying to me. But that's like, that genuinely kind of sounded like when wrestling fans try to explain things in wrestling logic.
That is, I've watched every supplemental feature that there is in these movies, and that is straight from the Wachowskis, so you can certify that fact.
I don't doubt it then. If anyone would know, I guess it's them. Yeah, but that sequence at the train station, I think, is just plain. I don't think there's any colored filters of any kind. Obviously, the real world stuff is very darkly lit, just to kind of create that contrast of everything kind of, the machines have control, there's oppression, there's everything that kind of keeps the visual choices in a very like grimy setting, whereas the Matrix has that kind of green filter. This train station, near as I remember, is like straightforward. The lighting is very bright. Obviously, it is a white background. I don't believe there's any kind of filters, or at least not to the degree of they are in the Matrix. So it creates a interesting visual standout, as opposed to the rest of the film.
We talked about the end of this movie a bit already, and the final scene with the architect and the Oracle, just how long do you think this piece is going to last? And she wisely says, as long as it can. And then we have a nice moment between Sati and the Oracle, where she thanks Neo. Sati has made a sunrise specifically for him, to thank him. And she asks the Oracle, will we ever see him again? And she says, I suspect so. Someday. And we know from the Wachowskis' mouths themselves, again, that this was intended to be the final Matrix movie. There was no even a hint at possible sequels or moving on. The story was closed here. We also know that there is another movie in the series. We'll talk about it again in a couple of weeks. So I was just a little bit surprised to kind of see the end of that movie. To see the end of this movie kind of just a little bit crack that door open, you know?
Yeah.
Again, it didn't seem to be the intention at the time, but now knowing what we know, and especially about the character Sati, I thought it was a little bit interesting just to end it on that specific of a note. And
It is.
noticeably, when the credits hit, it is not a Rage Against the Machine song. The first two movies, the end credits, Rage Against the Machine. The very first one is Wake Up. How appropriate is that? And then the second one, it ends with Calm Like a Bomb. And the third movie, credits, no Rage Against the Machine. Andrew, because the humans are no longer raging against the machine.
I guess.
There's layers to
guess.
everything. I've had
guess.
fun pointing out little stuff like that throughout these episodes, but truly,
He has, folks. He really has.
Truly, I love the series. I said it a million times already, but the biggest appeal to me is the ambition and rewatchability. You can read into so much of these movies and philosophies, and at times, you know, maybe the ambition is too great. Maybe it doesn't land as well as you would like, or maybe even, I will admit, like #PP, it does come across a bit pretentious. Like the movies not only have director's commentary, but they have commentaries with various philosophers. And that that just feels a bit pretentious to me. But on the other hand, I think it's so cool that this exists. I think the fact that these are Hollywood blockbuster movies and they have this much nuance and thought and layers while still delivering the goods on the popcorn end, but there's still so much beneath the surface. And every time I watch it, I find something else to chew on and just a kind of a new shade that really speaks to me. And you just don't find that a lot in this style of filmmaking. And I think, and it's my opinion, again, I'm not trying to change anyone's opinion of these movies, but even if they don't work for you, even if you don't love these movies like I do, even if you think it's an unsatisfying ending, I hope that you at least appreciate the ambition. I hope you at least appreciate that it is going for it in a way that it's not even a way that we don't see anymore in Hollywood blockbusters. It's a way that's always been rare in this style of filmmaking. It's rare to have, I think, this much ambition and nuanced storytelling and layers to it and thought put into it in this style of film. So I think that alone makes these movies worth celebrating.
I agree. I also do want to shout out the moment that our heroes, while chasing down the train man, have to go through some turnstiles, and Trinity flips over hers.
Yes.
She can't just jump over it; she has to flip over it.
They have this specific side shot to show how cool they all traverse it.
One just
Morpheus
jumps
leaps
over.
it and, she
Yeah, and she flips over it.
I know exactly
that's
what you're
literally
going
was
as
my
soon as you
first
started
note.
that.
Front flip over the turnstile. But no, I do definitely agree. And that's something you hear about the Wachowskis a lot. Like Cloud Atlas and Jupiter Ascending both also don't have the best reviews. But I remember in relation to Cloud Atlas especially, the word ambition was used a lot, where people were like, I don't know if all of this is working, but the sheer ambition of it has to be respected. So that is something that I think the Wachowskis definitely go for. And at the end of the day, I would much rather, it's like I said, I would much rather somebody swing for the fences and maybe not quite get there than just keep doing base runs the whole time. Especially, and that's not to say that I need every movie to be, this deep, heavy, philosophical, apocalyptic machine future sci-fi epic, but I'm especially in realms to like high budget profile blockbusters. I'm always going to appreciate people that take chances, push themselves, which is a key to a lot of this stuff. It's not just about potentially pushing the audience. It's about pushing yourself and making yourself go places that you didn't realize that you could go. And I think that shows through in these films in an immense way, where you can't help but see the attention and care and everything that went into these films. I do also want to shout out for this one in particular, Don Davis, who is the soundtrack composer for this film. The previous two films did use a lot of external tracks, especially that first film. I feel like the first film probably had a tie-in soundtrack album that was actually relatively successful because of all the songs that were on it. But this movie is essentially almost completely a score. There's a couple of there's one external track by Pale 3 and then a couple of songs that Don Davis does with Juno Reactor. But by and large, it's a lot of just score, which again, we're getting, the machine presence is getting more limited. So we're kind of moving away from external sources and going more to a classic score. And obviously the Neo Demerung that plays during the Smith Neo fight at the end is a particular standout. Just feels appropriately epic, creates a great sense of finality, creates that big fight feel that we're always looking for in pro wrestling, as it were. And it's just fantastic. And I don't really think we've talked about the scores too much, but I definitely wanted to shout out Don Davis for this one in particular, because it is a really, really great score.
Shout out to Rob Dugan, who his tracks are featured in the first two movies, being Club to Death and Furious Angels. I never would have known who Rob Dugan was if it weren't for those movies, but I ended up buying his album because of it, and it's all very cool. If you're into like instrumental stuff, it's like half instrumental, half with vocals, all very cool music. Go check those out. Big recommendation there. I want to wrap this up with a couple things. One, just a plea to anybody out there. I've talked a lot about all these extra memes.
Folks, please watch these movies for the love of God. Save me, please.
There's this scene as Neo and Trinity are traveling to the machine world where a sentinel, like spirit or ghost, goes through Neo. I don't know what that means. I don't know what's happening there. If you can explain it to me, hit me up on social. Let me know what the hell's happening there. But I just want to address the idea. We talked about it a little bit earlier that the Matrix film, especially that first one, can be viewed as an allegory for being trans. And it's something that's been looked at recently, of course, with the Wachowskis being trans themselves. And they have kind of signed off on it. Like other people have picked up on the pattern and they kind of signed off. And I think acknowledge that it certainly at the time was not a conscious effort. I've been furiously Googling. I'm fairly certain there's a term for whenever an artist speaks their truth in their art subconsciously. I think there's a specific term for that, but I cannot find it. But that seems to be pretty clear of what was happening. You look at the story of the Matrix, the idea that the physical body you're in is not your true self, and you need to wake up and become someone else and claim a new name, a new identity for yourself. And even the fact that Smith, the antagonist, makes it a point to always call Neo Mr. Anderson, essentially calling him by his dead name, even after he has become Neo and found his true self. So I think it's just very interesting that there's that layer, that added layer to these films. And when you look at the artists that created them, that created the movies, it's just a very cool, fun thing to examine. Another example that comes to mind is the author Chuck Palahniuk, who wrote probably most famously Fight Club, but a ton of great books that have a lot of them have been adapted. One of my favorite artists is an openly gay man now, but was not through a big part of his career, including when he wrote Fight Club. And there is definite homoeroticism throughout his books.
Chris, I say this as respectfully as I can. Fight Club's a gay movie.
Here's what I love though, Andrew. A lot of people don't quite, I hate to say they don't get it, but they have the wrong takeaways from Fight Club. And I think those same people would be flabbergasted to learn that the author was a gay man, given what they probably believe. But it's just a fun little bit of irony when you try to unpack all of that.
I think that if you said to me that Fight Club was the most misunderstood film of all time, I would not fight with you. I would probably be like, yeah, it is. Like it's one of those things where it feels like there's a I wouldn't necessarily say it's deliberate, but there is I mean, I'm certain there is some people, but I think there is a base level response to that film, although then again, I don't. It's kind of like Blazing Saddles, where like the whole point of Blazing Saddles is that racist people are dumb, and people don't seem to understand that. Like Fight Club to me feels like the message should be pretty obvious, but there is still a great many people who watch it and are kind of like they Tyler Durden was right, or Tyler Durden's the cool one. It's like no, watch it again, and I'm urging you to watch with your eyes.
Andrew, that's 99 episodes in the books. And appropriately, closing this chapter on the Matrix series, we're going to take a quick detour and come back to finish it off the last week of this month with the Matrix Resurrections. That is, of course, because next week is episode 100 of our podcast. Andrew, how are you feeling about that episode?
I don't know. I've never heard anyone say this is a perfect movie, but I'm excited to see if we can find the positive.
It's, we like to say the concept is a personal challenge. That's kind of the whole purpose of our podcast. And sometimes, of course, we talk about movies like the Matrix sequels that I personally love very much, and it's not very challenging. But other times, as we have done, it is a bit of a challenge. Maybe you've heard us struggle sometimes, but that's kind of the purpose. That's the goal. Most movies we talk about, there's not a lot of people singing the praises. And as we say, not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
I hate that some stuff gets overlooked in certain films. Taking it all back to episode 1, if you will, Green Lantern. Mark Strong as Sinestro.
Young men then.
But such wonderful casting, such a good performance that really deserves to be praised, and is truly where he gets thrown around a lot, but it's underrated. His performance there is so good. It's an all-time great superhero casting decision, and I wish we got more of it, but I'm glad we've got an episode out there singing its praises, and that could be said of every movie that we've talked about. We got a big challenge coming up, the big 100. Come back next week for that. It's going to be a good time, but of course, you know what time it is now. It's time for our question of the week. If you want to ask us a question for a future episode, you can. Just hop into our Discord server. There's a link in our show notes. If you've never used Discord before, it's free. It's just an app you download. It's just a way for communities to get together, hang out, talk about nerdy stuff. You can do a lot more than just ask us questions there. So I encourage you, if you like our podcast, go and hop there, join the community. But this week, our question comes from that guy in Doom. And here's the question, Andrew. What is your opinion on choice in video games? Star Wars, Knights of the Old Republic, and Fable brought the choice of good versus evil into games, and ever since, plenty of games have adopted some kind of morality system. Mass Effect, Fallout, etc. Do you feel this enhances gameplay, or is it a cheap gimmick to enhance replay value? Great question. We don't get a lot of video game questions here, but
we don't.
I think I play quite a bit of video games, Andrew. I know you at least dabble. I think we've got enough video game interest to take on a few of these, so bring on some more of those. But Andrew, your choice in video game, morality choice, good versus evil, choose to be the good guy or bad guy. You got a lot of experience playing games like that?
Well, I don't know if I don't know that I have experience with the games where like there's the paths, but as you well know, and as whoever that guy in Doom is may know, I do love the cinematic narrative type games that are driven by choice. For me, just kind of being the kind of the things that play to my sensibilities, the things I like watching, things like that. Those types of situations I love a lot, because to me, it does enhance the replay value, but it also allows you to play the story differently. So I like it a lot, whether it's the Quarry, whether it's Until Dawn, even the Dark Pictures anthology stuff they do, things like Detroit, Heavy Rain, stuff of that nature. All of that stuff I like a lot. I enjoy playing them. I enjoy replaying them. And I think they are a blast. So in that regard, I think they're great. I have really no further notes. I generally think that it's just a way to, I've heard people say that it's just a cheap way to get people to replay the game. But I actually appreciate a situation where they have kind of considered asking the fans to replay the game and have decided to say that if you are going to redo it, it can be different. You're not just playing the same game again. And so I, in that regard, have a lot of fun with them. I think they're a blast. And I hope Supermassive keeps making more choose your own adventure horror games until I'm dead.
Andrew,
in
that's
like
great. That's
80 years. Hopefully.
That's a great point. Reading this question, those aren't even the games that sprung to mind. But yeah, of course, those are choice-based games, and they're not all the choices you're making are on morality. Some can be seen that way, but I think you're right. It adds replayability. I have not played as many as you. I've played Until Dawn. I loved it. I thought it was great. And then there's the Telltale games, which had a pretty good run.
I've played some of those. I played Fables: The Wolf Among Us, which the sequel just now officially got pushed out of 2023 into 2024. So, guys, I'm running out of reasons to live. This
Jesus,
is getting tough.
Pull yourself together. I've got to agree 100%. Like, I like that choice base.
This is a family show, Andrew. Damn it.
That guy in Doom, he does make some specific comments about the morality system. And here's my take on that. Friend of the show, my wife, is currently playing the new Harry Potter game. I think it's called Hogwarts Legacy. And it has... She loves it. Big recommendation. I haven't played it, but it does have seems like some sort of morality system where you can be like a dark wizard or a good wizard. And she said a few times like she's loving the game, and she's like, I can't wait to play it again, and I'm gonna be an a-hole the whole time and be bad and experience it that way. And I haven't had the heart to tell her to like, yeah, you always have those plans, but it never happens. Anytime I play a game, like Infamous comes to mind. Especially that first Infamous game. It's if you've never played it, it's like an original superhero tale, and you play this guy that gets powers, and you can choose to use those powers for good or bad. If you decide to be good, you get a certain set of powers. If you decide to be bad, you get a different set of powers. Anytime I'm faced with that choice, I always play the good guy. I always make the right decision. I choose not to execute the random citizen on the street. I choose to save them. It just feels wrong otherwise. But I always tell myself, like, well, I want to experience this the other way. Like, I want to play it again and be bad and make all the bad decisions. Andrew, I never play through the games again. Like, even if they're really good, like Infamous, like I've played it the way I want to play it, and I never make the time to play that game a second time as the bad version. So in that respect, I think maybe it does feel a little gimmicky. Especially with a series like Infamous, where the good version of the story becomes canon when they make a second game. The second game, story-wise, assumes you made all the good guy decisions. So it makes it feel more important to play as a good guy. So yeah, I can see the gimmicky part of it. For sure.
In a sequel sense like that, I can definitely see it feeling gimmicky because it's like, okay, cool, you can be the bad guy. But like making a direct sequel to a game driven by choice like that just feels like a kind of a fool's errand. A direct sequel, at least. Like if you want to be a new character in that universe, that's certainly one way. But the problem is that, like you said, once you have to canonize the events of the first game, that makes it feel much more definite. Like that's why, like it was always weird to me. Like when Until Dawn came out, the creators were like, "Well, we don't really see the point in a sequel because first off, this story is closed off, but." They also made comments kind of similar to that, where it's like we don't want to like make one ending the ending. And I was like, well, good, because you shouldn't. But also, no one meant they wanted you to do a sequel to Until Dawn. They just want another game like this,
Yeah.
which thankfully they made with The Quarry. But in that regard, yeah, I could see it feeling like a gimmick, especially like if you know there's a sequel and you're just going to make a sequel that's about the same character, because then it's like, okay, cool. I don't assume there's any real mechanic to allow for you to, like, I guess you could technically like start the game off and then you could like ask the question of like, what decision did you make in the first game? And be like, were you the bad guy? The good? But then you're losing a lot of nuance there. So it's,
yeah, or even just look at your save data and figure it out that way.
I don't know if games can really do that. I don't know if that's a real ability they would have. But yeah, I can definitely agree with that when you start canonizing events and you choose a certain path, it's like, okay, cool. Well, you can be a bad guy, but it apparently doesn't count. So
yeah, I don't know. From before we get all the hate mail in response to this, Mass Effect seems to be the peak of this idea of decision based, and it carries through the sequels. I don't know how that game handles that. I have not played the Mass Effect series.
Neither have I.
But before anybody yells at us, I'm sure it handles exactly what we're talking about very well, but I don't know how. But I am curious what your thoughts are on choice in video game, good or bad. If you're out there and you have played through a game like Infamous as the good guy and the bad guy, if you have that kind of dedication, I want to know, do you actually exist? Is anybody actually doing that? Hit me up on social, that Discord.
I literally just told you that I replayed Until Dawn multiple times.
That's not the same. That's different endings. That's not the good versus bad thing. But although I will say, that is impressive, because I've played Until Dawn once. I loved it. I might play it again one day, but
Dude, I played that game like 7 times.
That's crazy. Don't you have like the platinum on that game?
I do. I think I do.
That's crazy.
I do not have it on the Quarry, because the Quarry is more difficult to try to go back and pick something up halfway through. It has a lot more like top heavy decisions that filter on down through it. So if there are achievements I need to make that require me to redo the game like 2 or 3 times, and I don't have the energy for that right now. But I'll get there eventually.
I'm sure
folks.
You'll get there. Yeah. I know, like, what's that? Detroit Become Human. Another one that friend of the show, my wife, played through.
I also played.
Shows you that decision tree, which I think is a pretty cool concept.
I did like Detroit a lot. I beat that several times. I was able to kind of try to find the good ending, the peaceful ending, and then also the everything is terrible ending. I always try, the first time I played through any one of these games, I always try, when you're dealing with multiple characters, I try to look for the ones that are jerks and keep them jerks throughout the game. I try to play everyone to what their personality is.
Yes, I do.
Yeah, I want to do that. And then obviously I do the version where like everyone is good, and then I do the version where everyone's kind of a jerk. But problem with the version where everyone's kind of a jerk is by halfway through I hate everyone. So I don't want to keep playing it, because I'm like, you're all jerks. But I made you this way. It's my own fault. But like Until Dawn is really great just because of like, you genuinely can have everybody die, everybody survives, everything. I like that about that game a lot. And you can literally have any permutation of people survive, basically. I always thought that was the best part of those.
What I will say, I heard this line, I think I heard it from Ben Hansen, but I think he was also quoting someone else, so I don't know where it comes from. But basically that video games, what they can make you feel that other mediums can't, is guilt and pride. Because you have, you're the one making the choices. And I think that's a fun concept to look at. And I think choice-based video games can really dive into that. You know, you're proud that you gave it to the end of the game and everyone survived, or you feel guilty because you did awful things or whatever. I think it's a cool concept. And I will say, when done well, like I remember playing Until Dawn for the first, well, I only played it once, but I remember playing it early in that game. You have a choice of whether or not you want to shoot a bird, and like, oh yeah, I'll shoot it. And then like a character gets mad at you, and I'm like, oh wait, I feel bad now. I feel bad that I chose to shoot that bird.
Why did I do this?
Yeah, exactly. And then, no spoilers coming up here, but The Last of Us really dives into this. And it's not a game with like branching paths, but it's one with high emotions and choices are made by characters. And in particular, The Last of Us Part 2, I literally failed the game a couple times because I did not want to make the choice that was in front of me. And I do find it pretty powerful that games can make us feel this way. Everyone, please pester Andrew to play the Last of Us games. I know he owns at least the first one, hasn't played it yet, and it's something that he would love. So he already mentioned that he loves the cinematic feel and storytelling of video games. So everyone, please tweet at Andrew and pester him to play those games. And join us next week for episode 100 of the podcast. It's going to be a big one. It's going to be fun.
You guys leave me alone. I have enough problems. I have enough that I'm dealing with on a daily basis. Don't do it. Or do it like nicely.
Next week. Until episode 100. Just remember that maybe not every movie is great.
But all movies have greatness.
Thank you to Mark Benavides for singing our theme song. You can check him out on Instagram at NotThatMarkAnthony. And thanks to Mitch for the music. Check him out on Twitter at I'm a Biggie Boy. And check our show notes for the SoundCloud link. Check out our store on TeePublic for some cool Best of the Rest merch. And if you enjoyed this episode, please share it with a friend. That is the only way that we grow. And follow us on social media at BOTRcast. Thank you. I love it. It gets my juices titillated. Is what I was going to say. I don't think I'm going to say that.
Use different words, please.
Symbolism and religious influences and mythology influences in this series.